I'd always figured betrayals came dressed in lies. Furtive text messages, lipstick on a collar, excuses about working late. But Jessica didn't bother with smoke or mirrors. She looked me dead in the eye across our kitchen table, her face lit cold by the glow of the overhead bulb, and dropped the words like bricks. Intimacy is over between us. No stutter, no hesitation, no attempt to soften the blow. Just flat, final, like she was reporting tomorrow's forecast. I didn't slam a fist on the table, didn't demand an explanation, didn't beg her to take it back. Instead, I sat still. My hands stayed loose on the mug of coffee I hadn't touched, my jaw tight but steady. The silence stretched between us, thick enough to choke on. She thought she was landing a knockout punch. What she didn't realize was that I've taken harder hits. A lifetime of busted knuckles on job sites, close calls on the road, bosses who thought they owned me. Life teaches you to absorb the blow before you decide how to strike back. Jessica shifted in her chair when I didn't react. She wanted drama, tears, maybe a desperate plea for clarity. Instead, she got a man who wouldn't play the part she wrote. "Did you hear me?" she asked, voice sharper now, searching for cracks. I looked at her, calm as a stone. "I heard you. That was it. Nothing more." Her eyes flickered. Confusion, maybe even a flicker of fear. That told me everything. She wanted control, wanted me to dance to her declaration. But I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction. I let the silence do the heavy lifting. Every second I didn't respond was a second she lost her footing. I leaned back in my chair, slow and deliberate. My body said what my mouth didn't. I wasn't crushed, I wasn't broken, and I sure as hell wasn't about to start begging. Her shoulders stiffened. She wanted to break me down, but instead she was the one squirming. Finally, I stood, rinsed my mug in the sink, and set it down without a sound. "All right," I said evenly, my back to her, and I walked out of the kitchen. No fight, no raised voice, no scene, just calm acceptance, sharp as a blade she didn't see coming. That was the moment the balance shifted. She thought she ended something. What she really did was set me free. The morning after her declaration, the air in the house felt different. Not heavy, not tense, just hollow, like the echo left in a room after the furniture's been hauled out. Jessica lingered in the doorway, half expecting me to fold. She was waiting for me to chase her, to ask if she really meant it, to offer her some kind of emotional life raft. I didn't. I woke early, showered, and dressed neat. Dark jeans, clean boots, pressed shirt. The routine wasn't for her. It was for me. I wanted to look like a man who had his life in order because I did. She leaned against the counter as I poured coffee, arms crossed, eyes tracking every move I made like she was waiting for the punchline. "You're quiet this morning," she said finally, trying to fish me out. I sipped the coffee, let the warmth roll through me, and set the cup down without looking at her. Got work. That was all. No explanation. No long sighs or tortured confessions. Just steady calm. She wanted to see me sweat, but all she got was neutrality. That's what stung her most. Not rage, not heartbreak, but the kind of calm that says, "I heard you, and I've already moved on inside my head." When I stepped out the door, the morning air felt crisp, sharp, alive. The truck door groaned as I climbed in, and I let the engine idle while I replayed her words from the night before. "Intimacy is over between us." Not with anger this time, but with clarity. She had drawn her line, and by refusing to beg, I had drawn mine. Respect isn't something you ask for. You enforce it quietly by refusing to stay where you're not valued. The drive to work was steady, no music, no distractions. Just the road humming under my tires and my mind sharper than it had been in months. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't thinking about how to keep the peace or smooth things over. I was thinking about myself, about my boundaries, about the simple truth that no man should tolerate being treated like an afterthought. When I walked into the shop, the smell of sawdust and oil greeted me like an old friend. My crew nodded, same as always, but I carried something different in me that morning. Steel under the skin. Jessica wanted me to bend. Instead, I set myself straighter. That was the first real line I drew. At work, something clicked. My focus sharpened like a blade honed on stone. The usual distractions, emails, small talk, phone calls, slid off me like water on wax. I tore through projects with a precision I hadn't felt in years. Every measurement exact, every plan airtight, every deadline met before anyone else even saw it coming. My coworkers noticed. "You're on fire lately," one of them said over lunch. I just shrugged and steered the talk toward business. No stories about home, no cracks showing. When the day wrapped, I didn't rush home. I drove straight to the gym, the iron and sweat calling me like a sanctuary. It had been too long since I pushed myself past comfort. I loaded the bar heavy, let the steel rest across my shoulders, and ground out squats until my legs shook. Every rep burned, every breath tore through me. But it wasn't pain. It was proof. Proof that I didn't need Jessica's approval. Proof that strength came from within, forged under weight and discipline. By the time I left, shirt clinging to me with sweat, arms trembling with fatigue, I felt cleaner than I had in weeks. Anger has a way of rotting a man if he keeps it bottled. But when you pour it into work and iron, it hardens you instead. That night, I pulled into the driveway later than usual. Lights glowed in the windows. Jessica waiting, no doubt rehearsing the scene where I finally snapped. I walked inside, set my keys down, and sat at the table with a plate of food. I warmed myself. She hovered nearby, eyes sharp, ready for a fight. I ate quietly, steady. The only sound was the scrape of fork against plate. No outburst, no accusations, just calm. And that silence, stronger than any storm, cut deeper than raised voices ever could. The rhythm held for days. Work, gym, dinner. No drama, no arguments. Just a steady life lived without asking her for anything. The house felt less like home and more like neutral ground. My orbit no longer circled hers. It charted its own course. Jessica noticed. She used to expect me at 6 sharp, sitting across from her with the usual chatter about bills, the neighbors, the small grind of daily life. Now I came and went with a calm that unnerved her. Some nights I stayed late at the shop, wrapping up a project. Other nights I hit the gym harder, chasing exhaustion like it owed me money. Then Friday came. I had dinner with a colleague, steak, bourbon, good talk about new contracts. I didn't rush through it. I let myself enjoy it. When I finally pulled into the driveway, the porch light glared like an interrogation lamp. Jessica was waiting, arms folded, voice sharp as a knife the second I walked through the door. "You're late." I slipped off my jacket, hung it up slowly. "Yeah," I said steady. I was out. No apology, no excuse, just a simple fact laid bare. Her mouth opened, ready for the follow-up strike, but nothing came. She wasn't expecting neutrality. She wanted guilt or at least a justification she could tear apart. Instead, she got a man standing in his own calm, unmoved. I walked past her into the kitchen, poured a glass of water, and drank it in silence. My shoulders loose, my breathing even. She hovered in the doorway, restless, like she was the one who owed me an explanation. And that's when it hit her. The control she thought she had was slipping like sand through her fingers. Every silent shrug, every calm answer, every night I didn't orbit her. It broke the confidence she'd built on the idea that I needed her more than she needed me. Power doesn't always roar. Sometimes it just shrugs and walks past without looking back. A week later, one of the guys from work threw a birthday party at a bar downtown. Nothing fancy, pool tables, jukebox, cheap beer that went down easy. I showed up in a clean shirt, boots polished, carrying the kind of confidence that only comes when you stop asking permission to exist. The night flowed easy. I laughed, clinked glasses, even ended up in a group photo someone snapped near the dartboard. No stage smiles, just me, relaxed, standing tall. By morning, that picture was floating around social media. Tag after tag, coworkers posting about a good night. I didn't think much of it, until I walked through the front door after work and found Jessica waiting. Phone in hand, screen lit up with my face surrounded by people grinning wide. "Looks like you had fun," she said. her voice tight under the casual tone she tried to fake. I set my keys on the counter, met her eyes, and answered plainly, "Yeah, I did. That was it." No over-explaining, no apology for enjoying myself. Just confirmation. Her lips pressed thin. For the first time, she understood the truth. The world could see me standing tall, thriving without her shadow overhead. No one at that party saw a broken man or a neglected husband. They saw strength, laughter, and independence. And Jessica hated it. Not because I'd embarrassed her, but because I hadn't. Because my life didn't fall apart the moment she withdrew. Because people could see I was fine. The mirror had turned, and in its reflection she saw her own irrelevance. It happened on a Tuesday morning, the kind of morning where the house was quiet except for the scrape of my fork on the plate. I was halfway through eggs and toast when Jessica broke the silence. "I didn't mean it like that," she mumbled, eyes fixed on the counter. I didn't even look up. I cut another piece of toast, chewed, swallowed, and set the fork down. "You meant enough to say it." Her head snapped toward me, searching for softness that wasn't there. What she found was a man calmly finishing breakfast, unmoved by her revision of history. Later that week, her tactics shifted. The clothes she chose in the mornings suddenly leaned toward tighter fits, brighter colors. She lingered closer when I came through the door, a hand brushing my arm as I passed. Little touches meant to reel me back. I saw it for what it was. Not affection, control. The same way she'd once dangled approval like a carrot. Now she dangled regret, hoping I'd chase it. But the truth was simple. I wasn't hungry anymore. When she leaned in one night, trying to close the gap she'd declared open, I stepped aside to grab a glass from the cabinet. Not harsh, not dramatic, just a calm sidestep. The message landed harder than any words. She'd made her declaration, and I wasn't about to let her walk it back just because the consequences didn't taste the way she imagined. Regret had arrived, but it was late, and I was already too far down my own path to turn back. It started subtly. A text during the day. "How's work?" Something she hadn't sent in years. Not since we were first married, and she used to care about how my day went. First, I ignored it. Then another came the next day. "What time will you be home?" By the third day, I finally replied, "Late." One word, no explanation. That's when the shift began. Jessica went from detached queen on her throne to a woman chasing something slipping through her fingers. The same woman who'd once sat across from me, cold and certain, declaring intimacy dead, was now circling like a bird afraid of losing its perch. First, it was little things. She hovered closer when I shaved in the morning. She lingered at the door when I laced my boots for work. She started cooking meals she hadn't made in years. Steak the way I liked it, mashed potatoes smooth instead of lumpy, green beans with butter and pepper. I ate, thanked her with a nod, and cleared my plate. But I didn't let the gratitude turn into affection. She wanted me to bridge the gap she'd created. I wasn't going to. Then came the questions. "Where are you going tonight?" she asked one Wednesday as I picked up my gym bag. "Out," I said. "With who?" "With myself." Her lips tightened, but she didn't push further. Not then. By Friday, she was unraveling. I came home late again, fresh from a dinner with a coworker, laughter still lingering in my chest. She was waiting in the living room, pacing like she'd rehearsed this moment all evening. "You've been distant," she blurted, voice high, almost frantic. I set my keys down, calm as ever. "No, I've been steady. You just don't like where I'm standing." That one landed. I saw it in her eyes, the flash of panic behind her attempt to hold composure. The days that followed were a storm. Her texts multiplied. "Miss you. Where are you? Can we talk?" I replied sparingly, if at all. My silence became the loudest answer I could give. One night, I walked in to find candles lit on the dining table, her dressed in something that looked more like bait than an apology. The smell of roast chicken filled the air. She smiled nervously, pouring wine into glasses. I pulled out the chair, sat, and ate in silence. She watched every bite, desperate for a crack in my armor. When the plates were cleared, she reached across the table, fingers brushing mine. "Please," she whispered, voice trembling now. I didn't mean it. I was angry. I was stupid. Don't leave me. Her hand clutched mine like a lifeline, her eyes wet, the same eyes that once looked at me like I was the only man in the room. Now they looked at me like I was the last rope keeping her from drowning. I slid my hand out of hers. Slow, steady, deliberate. Need doesn't mean love, I said quietly. And I don't stay where I'm only needed. She broke then. The tears she'd been holding back came in a rush, sobs racking her shoulders as she buried her face in her hands. For years, she'd carried herself like she was untouchable, the one in control. Now she was a woman begging for scraps of a man she thought she could discard. I didn't gloat. I didn't shout. I didn't tell her she deserved it, though she did. I simply sat there, calm as a stone in a storm, watching her realize the truth. Strength isn't loud. Sometimes it's just the refusal to move when the world around you shakes. That night, she crawled into bed after me, inching closer, her hand reaching across the sheets like it used to. I let it hover there, close but not touching. She whispered, I can change. I closed my eyes, steady breath filling the room. So can I thought, and I already had, because the man lying there wasn't the man she thought she broke. He was stronger, calmer, sharper than before, and he no longer belonged to her. Sunday mornings used to be ours. Coffee brewing, the paper spread across the table, her humming in the kitchen while I worked through the crossword. A rhythm so steady it felt like part of the house itself. But this Sunday, the air was heavy. No humming, no paper, just Jessica sitting across from me, hands wrapped tight around a mug that had long gone cold. I poured my coffee, sat down, and took my time with the first sip. She was trembling before she even opened her mouth. Can we start over? She asked, voice barely above a whisper. There it was, the last card she had left. I set my cup down slowly, the sound of porcelain on wood sharp in the quiet room. Her eyes darted up, searching for softness, for some sign I'd reach across and pull her out of the hole she'd dug. But all she found was calm steel. You don't get to play with words like that, I said evenly, and expect nothing to change. Her lips parted, then shut again. She blinked fast, like she was fighting back tears. I was angry. I didn't mean. You meant enough to say it. I cut in. And you said it like a fact, not a mistake. You drew a line. You don't get to erase it now. She reached across the table, hand trembling, fingertips grazing the back of mine. Once upon a time, that touch would have been enough to ground me, to melt me. But not anymore. I pulled my hand back and wrapped it around the coffee cup instead. Her face crumpled. Please, we can fix this. I'll do better. Just don't leave me. The desperation in her voice was raw, stripped of the arrogance she once wore like armor. For a second, the man I used to be almost stirred, the man who wanted to protect, to forgive, to keep the peace. But that man had died the moment she decided intimacy was disposable, something she could toss aside without flinching. I studied her across the table, the woman who thought she could declare war and then pretend it was just words when the battlefield turned against her. And in that moment, I realized forgiveness wasn't even on the table. Not because I was bitter, but because I was clear. Clarity is colder than rage, and sharper. I don't hate you, I said, voice calm, steady. But I'm done. You wanted distance, you've got it. Permanently. Her breath hitched like she'd been struck. She stood abruptly, chair scraping against the floor, and moved around the table toward me. Her hands gripped my shoulders, shaking. Don't say that. We can be us again. We can go back. I rose slowly, taller, firmer, her hands sliding uselessly down my arms as I stood. There is no back. There's only forward. And my forward doesn't include this. Her tears broke then, streaming freely. She collapsed into the chair I just left, sobbing into her hands. The sound filled the house, sharp and desperate, but it didn't move me, because goodbye isn't revenge. It isn't cruelty. It's clear. I walked to the counter, rinsed out my cup, and placed it in the rack. My motions were calm, deliberate, a man in control. a man who'd already made his peace with leaving. Behind me, she whispered one last plea, broken and small. "Don't go." I turned, met her eyes one final time, and spoke the one word she never expected. The one word she couldn't control, couldn't twist, couldn't undo. "Goodbye." The word landed heavier than any slam of a door, heavier than any argument ever could. It wasn't rage, it wasn't spite, it was finality. She reached for me one last time, but I didn't move, didn't bend. I let the space between us stand as proof of the choice she made, and the strength I'd found. And in that quiet kitchen, with sunlight spilling across the table and her tears staining the wood, I knew the truth. Leaving wasn't a loss. It was freedom. The house was quiet, but not peaceful. It was the kind of silence that follows a storm. Branches snapped, ground wet, air heavy with the smell of something broken. Jessica sat slumped in the chair where I'd left her after saying goodbye, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. I didn't speak to her again. There was nothing left to say. I moved through the house like a man packing up after a long job. Not hurried, not frantic, steady. I pulled a small duffel from the closet, the same one I'd used years ago when work sent me on a week-long project out of state. I didn't need much. A few shirts, clean jeans, socks, boots, my shaving kit. Freedom doesn't take up much space. Every zip of the bag was deliberate. Every folded shirt a line drawn under the life we'd shared. Behind me, Jessica's muffled voice cracked through the silence. "Please, don't do this." I didn't answer. She'd spoken her truth weeks ago. My silence now was just me living mine. When the bag was full, I swung it over my shoulder and walked down the hall. At the doorway, I paused long enough to take one last look. The photos on the wall, wedding smiles, vacations, family gatherings, looked like they belonged to strangers. That life was gone the second she declared intimacy over, and it wasn't coming back. She scrambled from the chair and grabbed my arm, her nails digging into my sleeve. Her face was wet, streaked, desperate. "I'll change. I'll do anything, just stay, please." I looked at her hand clutching me, then at her face. Calm, even I freed myself from her grip. Not a jerk, not violence, just firm and final, a man removing the last chain. "Staying would have been the punishment," I told her. My voice was steady, the truth laid bare. Her mouth opened, but no sound came. For once, she had no reply, no defense, no counterattack. Just the collapse of control slipping through her fingers. I turned, opened the door, and stepped into the clean air outside. The sky was wide and clear, the kind of blue that only shows up after rain. My truck sat in the driveway, solid and waiting, like it always had. I tossed the bag in the passenger seat, slid behind the wheel, and let the engine roar to life. The sound filled my chest, stronger than any words, steadier than any promise she could have made. Through the windshield, the road stretched open before me, long and empty, pointing anywhere but back. As I shifted into gear, I caught a glimpse of her in the doorway, small and shaking, framed by the house that used to be ours. She looked like a woman who finally understood the weight of her own words. I didn't wave, didn't honk, didn't offer one last glance of softness. My hands stayed steady on the wheel as I pulled onto the road. Gravel crunched under the tires, then smoothed into asphalt. The house shrank in the rearview mirror until it was gone. For the first time in a long time, I felt no anger, no bitterness, no regret, just freedom. Because walking away isn't a weakness. It isn't surrender. It's the strongest act a man can make when the life he built turns into a cage. The open road stretched ahead, full of miles I hadn't yet lived, full of chances I hadn't yet taken. And as the wind rushed through the open window, I knew I wasn't running from something. I was moving toward myself.
Subscribe and stay one step ahead of cheaters. And trust me, the next story makes this one look like a fairy tale.